Chapter 43 of the Tao Te Ching, pronounced Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way and its power, opens with what sounds like a paradox. The softest thing in the world masters the hardest. It then draws from that a principle about action, about teaching, and about what most people never manage to practice. Tiānxià zhai zhai ru, chai cheng Tiānxià zhai zhai jiān, wu yu ru wu jiān, wu shi yi zhai wu wei zhai yu yi, bu yan zhai jiao wu wei zhai yi Tiānxià zhai zhai zhai. In English, the softest thing in the world gallops over the hardest thing in the world. What has no substance enters where there is no space. From this I know the value of non-action, teaching without words, the benefit of non-action. Few in the world attain these things. The first line contains a character worth noting. Chinese letter, chai cheng, which means to gallop, the image of a horse running free. This is not a picture of quiet yielding. The soft thing moves through the hard thing with a kind of velocity the hard thing cannot match. What Laozi points to here is water. He returns to it throughout the text. Water carves canyons, not by striking harder than the stone, but by moving according to its own nature, continuously, without insisting on a particular shape. The stone resists, the water simply goes where it goes. Over time the canyon is there. The second line deepens the observation. What has no substance enters where there is no space. The word Chinese letter, wu yu, means something like without fixed form, not nothing, but no fixed shape. And Chinese letter, wu jiān, means without gap, without opening. The point is that precisely because something has no fixed shape, it passes through what a solid object cannot. Air fills every room. Light enters cracks a hammer cannot touch. The thing that refuses to be pinned down cannot be blocked in the same way as the thing with edges. From this physical observation, Laozi draws his conclusion. Chinese letter, wu wei, is valuable. This term is usually translated non-action, and that translation causes confusion. It does not mean doing nothing. It means acting without forcing, without imposing your form on a situation, without overriding what is already moving. The river doesn't exert itself to cut through the landscape. It moves in the direction its nature takes it, and the landscape responds. There is immense activity in Chinese letter. It is not stillness, it is effort without contortion. The final line names two things that few people reach: teaching without words, and the benefit of Chinese letter. These are placed side by side for a reason. Both require the same underlying orientation, influencing through presence and pattern rather than through instruction and force. Teaching without words is not silence for its own sake. It's the recognition that most of what people absorb from each other isn't delivered. A person who stays composed during a crisis teaches everyone around them something about composure that no training manual covers. A parent whose behavior and a parent whose lectures diverge. Children absorb the behavior. The explicit instruction goes in one ear. The demonstrated reality of how that person moves through the world is what stays. Laozi closes the chapter honestly. Few in the world attain these things. That's not a lament. It's a plain description. Not because the ideas are complicated. They are not. But because when force is available, we reach for it. When a situation feels out of control, the instinct is to grip harder, speak louder, apply more pressure. Those instincts exist for good reasons. The chapter doesn't call them wrong. It says they have a limit. There are gaps they cannot enter. What might someone carry from this today? Not a method, more like a shift in attention toward what is already moving, what is already soft, what works without insisting on being seen working. There are things in most people's lives that function the way water functions, relationships that deepen without being managed, understanding that settles in without being forced, creative work that arrives when the pressure is off. The chapter asks you to notice those things more carefully, not to abandon effort, but to see that some kinds of effort work precisely because they don't announce themselves. The passage doesn't resolve into advice. It ends with an observation about rarity. That rarity is the real subject. Chinese letter isn't obscure because it's mystical. It's rare because it requires trusting that the soft approach is actually the powerful one, and that trust is difficult to hold when the stone is right in front of you. What has no shape cannot be stopped by what has shape. The softest thing moves through the hardest not by overcoming the resistance, but by having nothing for the resistance to catch. The next chapter is 44.